Hey, welcome to another episode of Spritz of Wisdom. Let's begin like we do every time with my sip of the week. These are my highs and lows of the previous 7 days living here in South Italy. So starting with the highs, these past 7 days, I have really been leaning into the power of investing into yourself and the ROI that you gain from that. It's really interesting because whenever we think of ROI, return on investment, we are usually thinking of monetary investment. So you invest into stocks and shares, or you invest into a business and you receive a return on your investment. But actually, there is so much power in investing into yourself, whether that be a monetary investment because you buy a course or you buy a program, or whether that's simply an investment of your time or looking after yourself in some way. Now, in this past week, I have invested into myself in a couple of different ways. I've been consuming amazing content, some of which has even inspired today's episode. I have been learning about things that interest me and bring me joy. And I have just been realizing the importance of doing that, of filling up your own cup, however that looks for you. So I'm really, really happy about that because I think we have to understand that if you're going to spend money on something, say you want to, I don't know, improve your knowledge of something, but you know that you have to lay out money to improve that skill. Let me tell you, it's going to be one of the best investments you make into yourself. But you don't even have to do that. Like YouTube is a great resource. I always think of YouTube as being like the university of life. You can find a video about pretty much everything on YouTube, and you can certainly educate yourself without any kind of cost attached to it for quite some time. So it's been a great lesson for me this past week, leaning into that and leaning into like listening to podcasts and filling up my cup. When the world looks pretty bleak, you can certainly control the things that you consume and the investment that you make into yourself. Because trust me, I think there's always going to be something telling you that it's not the right time to, I don't know, take a course or, learn something new or whatever it may be. But I always think that in those moments, that's the time you should be doing it. Like the time that you're talking yourself out of it is usually because you're procrastinating in some way. And that is exactly the time when you should be starting something. So in terms of other highs of the past week, just appreciating living here in Italy, which has actually inspired today's episode. So we'll come back to that in a bit. But when it comes to lows of the past week, realizing that you're never going to please everybody on social media. And I kind of put this into the low category a little bit because it's a shame that in life nowadays, people form opinions without reading content or without understanding better the person behind that content. Or people are so quick to be keyboard warriors, but if you were to meet them in real life, they would probably be meek as mice. It's a really, really interesting thing. Like the internet for me is a wonderful world, but you're never going to please everybody. And I've kind of really leaned into that recently. I'm being very, very open in a lot of my Instagram posts recently, and I'm realizing that it's resonating with the right people and the people that have an opinion about what I say, or they want to just use it as an excuse for them to dump their thoughts onto my post. They are the people that perhaps that content is not for, but of course, the internet gives everybody a voice. And so we have to understand sometimes. And I think it was this amazing creator I follow, Jade Beeson. She said one time that you wouldn't let people dump rubbish in your living room. So why let them dump rubbish on your social media feeds? And it's exactly the same principle. And I'm really aware of this. And I do kind of allow some comments to come on because I think it creates healthy discussion, but I'm also really aware that you're never going to please everybody. So there's literally no point in wasting energy on trying to convince people to come around to your way of thinking or to understand where you're coming from. Because if somebody has started a comment and they are immediately kind of attacking you in some way, you're not going to get them to change their mind. So you may as well just let them be and realize that nothing is ever personal. So that's been interesting. I'd say it's a low just because it's a shame that we have to be this way in society. It's a shame that we cannot allow two things to be true at the same time. It's a shame that we cannot just take our time to understand things better before we post. It's a shame that we don't think before we speak. But there we are. This is life. So let's move into the full pour of today's episode because I've been reflecting on the fact that I've been living here in Italy for 8 years this year. And when I first moved to Italy, I was completely blown away by the beauty, by the fact that this was now going to be my life, by all of the things that after nearly 8 years have kind of rubbed off a little bit because I did a an Instagram carousel the other day, and I was talking about this because I do think there comes a point when you live in Italy where the shine wears away. And it's not necessarily because you are looking at things from a negative perspective, but it's just the fact that you do go through things when you're living here in Italy. I've been through so many trials and tribulations. I went through the pandemic living in this country. I've been through a number of different jobs. I've kind of navigated my own personal challenges. And it's been quite something. But I think once you've gone through those things, you do have a different perspective on life here. And I think it's really interesting, though, that even though that can happen, you are still able to lean into the beauty of this country and not forget the journey and not forget the magic of the experience. And it's something that I wanted to remind myself of this week, because I do think sometimes that when I talk about the reality of life here, sometimes it can seem that I come at it from quite a strong angle. Maybe I'm like, very direct. I tell it how it is. But I do that because I think if you can accept Italy in the most extreme cases, you will absolutely be able to build a thriving life here. It doesn't sit right for me as a person to just talk about the positive aspects all the time, because yes, it is wonderful here. And yes, I've learned a lot. And yes, I'm still here. So that tells you everything that you need to know. But I think it doesn't help when you start encountering challenges here and you start realizing that life here isn't very easy. If you've only exposed yourself to that type of content, like, you do need a bit of a reality check in order to survive the more challenging aspects of life in Italy. And so I think sometimes when you do lean into that quite a bit, you do become a little bit pessimistic. And so it just took me back this week to kind of like the things that I've experienced in Italy that have really made me appreciate this country so much more. I mean, I would say, first of all, the first thing that has come on the back of this move is that I've completely changed as a person. I think when I moved here, I had a particular lens on life. I'd been a police officer, I'd had my own business. So they are very particular ways of living. And I moved here and I was exposed suddenly to a completely different culture, outlook on life, approach to life, appreciation for different things than I'd ever been used to before. And also, I would say at points, it felt like a return to the roots and the heart of something. And what I mean by that is that living in London, of course, London is a very cosmopolitan city. It's very innovative. There's, lots of opportunity. But of course, on the other side, it's also a difficult city to live in. It's not this picture perfect postcard. But I think coming from a city like that to the south of Italy, it does feel like you've entered a different universe. And it's not because there's anything wrong with the south of Italy. It's just because the way of life here is so different. Like closing for August, having businesses shut down for August. Now, this is pretty much an Italy thing, not so much just the south of Italy, but having that month be for me like a month that I just write off every year, because I know that if I need to get things done, there are going to be very few places that are open in that month to do them. Also, the afternoon kind of closure of shops and businesses. This is something that I didn't kind of ever really encounter in the UK. But then I guess the flip side of that is having shops and businesses stay open later, whereas in the UK, that doesn't always happen unless you're in the big shopping centres. And so there have been a lot of things like taking it back to the roots of something. The traditional way of shopping, I think things have changed post-pandemic, absolutely. I think it forced businesses to wake up a little bit and to move more of their services into an online capacity. But certainly when I moved here in 2018, it was amazing for me to see how traditional independent shops was still at the heart and soul of so many communities here. And I think, in the UK, that has been a huge struggle because high streets are dying in the UK. People can't afford the rents. People are transitioning from in-presence shopping to online shopping. It's a whole different way of living. And here, people will prefer to go to the butchers, the greengrocers, the fishmongers, rather than going to one supermarket and buying everything there. And it really, in a way, made me appreciate that kind of way of life even more, because there is beauty in that. There really, really is. There's beauty in going to a place that has a specialism in something and doesn't try to be everything for everyone. I think sometimes the bigger supermarkets, the department stores, the places that sell everything all under one roof, as much as there is a huge amount of convenience behind that, you cannot be an expert in everything that you sell in that capacity. But when you go to a shop that sells just one particular type of product or food or whatever it may be, those people know what they're doing. And there is a certain amount of beauty behind that, I would say. But not only from like taking it back to the roots of things, but also from realizing what's really important in life. Living here in Italy has shown me that being present is one of the most important things you can do. I will have conversations with some of my English students and I will ask them, like, what their 5-year plans are. What are some of the biggest things they want to achieve in their life? And without a doubt, like out of the hundreds of students that I've taught here to date, I would say that people struggle with these questions here. People might have a dream, they might have a goal, but it almost feels like it's a struggle for them to admit that or to say what it is that they want to do. Because it's not really, I don't think, the culture here to think so far into the future or to verbalize it anyway. Maybe you can believe it inside of yourself, you can have an inner wisdom, but it's not really the culture to sit at the kitchen table and be so openly ambitious and talk about the things that you want to do in 5 or 10 years' time, because people are very much grounded into the moment here, especially in the south of Italy. I feel like I've noticed something here in the sense that people here value connection more than your accolades. And it's interesting because I would say in the UK, it can be like that, but often your accolades are valued before the connection. And often people make connections with you because of your accolades. Whereas here, people are interested in you as a person and not so much in all of the things that you've achieved. And I think that's a beautiful thing. And I guess it does take it back to the real root of what being human is about, like making connections, understanding each other, having those kind of friendships. It's a beautiful thing. And I feel like in a way, even though I think life here sometimes can feel a little bit old fashioned in some respects, there is a lot of beauty in that. When we have the internet that's basically dominating a lot of connections that we have with people nowadays, there's something so refreshing to see that if somebody wants to start a business here or they want to make connections with people, the most important thing that they're going to do is to arrange an in-person meeting. I think that's beautiful. I also think for me as well, food, I've always been the first person to tell you how much living here in Italy has impacted my diet. I eat the best I've ever eaten now in my entire life. And I credit Italy for all of that and so much more. I also appreciate the simplicity of food. You don't need to have like really complex ingredients to create a wholesome, tasty dish. And that is something that I have really, really learned. Also, the fact that Italian people, especially in the South, I think, and it's because of this, because the South has always been considered to be poorer compared to the rest of Italy. People here appreciate food in a different way. They don't like to waste food. They will reuse food in other dishes if you don't, use it in that one dish at the time. And I like that approach in a way, but I have struggled sometimes because I do find here in the south of Italy that people have quite a lacking attitude towards money, towards wealth, towards growth in that sense. And maybe it can be a lot because of the history of the region, because of their own personal circumstances. Absolutely. There's not a one size fits all approach to this. But I think sometimes I value those moments where people are being very resourceful with what they have. But on the other side of things, I think I also lean into wanting to improve myself and wanting to have less of a lacking attitude to things, because I do think the energy you put out into the world is what you receive back. And if you have this energy of lack, scarcity, not enough, I think that you continue to attract those situations into your life. So that's my own personal kind of take on that part. But there has been a lot of beauty in just the simplicity of cooking and food and the approach that people have here. I think as well for me, like my environment has changed radically. And this has meant that I've appreciated things like never before. Like, being close to the sea, having predominantly beautiful summers here with sunshine, high temperatures, it does something to you that unless you've lived in a country of permanent grey skies, you may not really appreciate. That has impacted me. Like I wake up with more energy in the morning when the weather's good. I want to do more. I want to be outside more. And that has been an amazing thing for me. But I think as well, like appreciating the beauty of this country, I still, even nearly 8 years in, I'm constantly taking photos. Like I'll go somewhere and I'll be like, oh, that door is beautiful. And then I'll be like, oh, look, that shutter looks incredible on that building. Like I am constantly taking photographs here. And you would think that I might be a little bit more used to the way things look here now after all of this time. But no, because Italy is this, it constantly continues to surprise you. And I feel like that is the magic of living here. I don't think you could ever get bored here. Maybe if you live somewhere completely remote and you don't have much stimulation going on around you, at some point, maybe you might want to have something different going on in your life. But if you live somewhere with moderate activity, you've got lots of things going on that you can explore, visit, whatever it may be. I just don't think you could ever really, really get bored here. It's something that when I sit here now and I think the challenges have been strong here, right? I always think back to something that Stephen Bartlett wrote about in his book, Happy, Sexy Millionaire. And he was talking about this concept of, is the challenge greater than the reward? And this is something that I always hold on to as a question whenever I'm dealing with any kind of struggle here. Is the challenge greater than the reward? Because if the challenge is greater than the reward, then maybe you shouldn't be doing that anymore. And I think for many people that move to Italy, the challenge is greater than the reward. It's more effort than perhaps they're willing to put in. It's harder than they ever thought it would be. Or it's just not the lifestyle that suits them. Because I do think you have to have a particular mindset to live in Italy. You have to have a particular approach to life. I think it can be hard coming from countries like America, the UK, wherever it may be, where there's a whole other kind of emphasis placed on life, a hustle culture, working, materialism. It can be good. On one hand, absolutely, because you start to appreciate life in a different way by moving to Italy. But it can be hard because priorities change here and there may not be priorities that you're used to and have been used to your whole life. But I would say that if the reward is greater than the challenge, which it has been for me, then it's something that you need to follow through on. It's a journey that you go on. I reflect on all of the challenges that I've experienced to date, and I would say that they have helped me and shaped me to become a much better person. But on the back of it, I think if my life had been like this rosy daydream for nearly 8 years, I'm not sure that I would have appreciated life here as much as I do. I think through those challenges, through those difficulties, I see things differently, see things, I guess, from the perspective of somebody who actually comes from Italy, because my life is as if I were an Italian. I work in this country. I work for an Italian company. I earn euros and, I have like the average Italian salary of somebody in the south of Italy. I do things that an average Italian person would do. I don't create a separate life for myself, which feels like it is somewhat different to those around me. I don't still work for my old country. I don't kind of stick to cliquey groups and not integrate with the locals. I have this very immersive experience. And I think in a way it's helped me to understand this culture even more. And this is why I talk about the reality of what I do through all of my content, because I think if you want to move here and you want to really understand this country, you have to go on the journey that I've been on. You've got to throw yourself into the experience head first. You've got to live your life as if you were an Italian person and not as somebody who's got one foot in this country and one foot back in your own. And so it's just been an interesting week of reflections. But for my chin chin this week, I really want to say to you, never forget what led you to where you are today. It can be easy sometimes to be swayed by, those challenges, those difficulties. But essentially, there's always something beautiful around you. There's always something that reminds you of why this has all been worth it. And if, however, you are sitting there thinking, well, actually, I don't feel that way about my situation. I feel like the challenge is greater than the reward. Then maybe it's time for you to rethink things and do things differently and approach something from a different perspective or change course entirely. Because I see people slogging through life, doing things that are clearly not meant for them. Clearly they shouldn't still be doing. There's no passion, there's no energy, they're not happy, but they do it because they feel they should be doing it. And let me tell you, that is leading you to the destination of regret. You need to be in alignment with the things that you do. And you need to have a greater vision. And if you understand that there is a reward at the end of it and it's going to be worth any kind of pain that you might go through in the interim period, you're going to benefit so much more from the experience than someone who struggles on and doesn't want to admit that perhaps for them, the challenge is bigger than anything they could ever gain from the experience. And so it's just something to think about, like we're all going to go through difficulties in life. The world is in a delicate place. And I think we just have to remember what path we're on and the things that are around us that help us to see that if we are on the right path, it's worth it. And if we're not, then maybe it's time to course correct. I will see you in the next episode.